Good morning, good morning, good morning, good morning. Today, we're going to be touching upon one of my favorite subjects, one that affects every single one of us, the soul. The question we asked, first of all, the class is dedicated for the Refuah Shlema of Chaim Baruch Eliezer Ben Rasa Esther Bezat Hashem. Akadosh Baruch Hu should give him a complete Refuah Shlema, and we should hear only good news from all of Klal Yisrael. Everyone should be healthy. Do souls have different levels? Can we reach a higher level than our soul? Today, I would like to invite you to a very special discussion in understanding what is a soul and how somewhat one can change his destiny. There is a story that is said. The story goes as follows. A person that is a sage, a person that is a fool, and suddenly starts speaking words that he heard from a sage. At that moment, he will appear like a fool, or he's going to appear like a sage. He will appear like a sage. What would happen to a person that has a bad character and is not nice, and he is going to give a sandwich to a homeless man that's in front of the store? At the moment you look at him, he looks like a nice guy or he looks like a bad guy? Obviously, he looks like a nice guy. When God gave us our soul, it was with a very special purpose. Why would God bring a soul that is of such a high level spiritually to such a lowly physical body that is limited? It's like sending someone in jail, someone in prison. Why would you want to do that to a part of you? Obviously, God is ready to take that risk because the purpose of the descent is in order to elevate the soul at levels it cannot reach. There's a teaching of our sages in Pirkei Avot, Yafeh Sha'a Ahad b'tshuva u'ma'asim tovim ba'olam hazeh mikol hayei ha'olam haba. Ve'yafeh sha'a ahad shel korat ruach ba'olam haba mikol hayei ha'olam hazeh. I translate. One instant of teshuvah, of return, of connection in this world is higher than a lifetime in the world to come, which is the spiritual realms. On the other hand, our sages say a moment of pleasure in the spiritual realms in Olam Haba, in the world to come, is worth more than a lifetime in this world. So I don't understand. Over there it's better, or over here it's better. Well, it depends how you look at it. One day, somebody came to the famed Rabbi Yitzchak of Berdichov and told him, Rabbi, I am not a religious man. I don't practice anything. In the Shema, it says that if you are observant, you follow the mitzvot, God will bless you with parnasah, with sustenance, with riches, etc. But if on the other hand you don't, you will not have anything. Look at me. I'm the wealthiest man of the city, and I don't observe anything. Rabbi Yitzchak of Berdichov said to him, you're asking me a question from the Shema. So obviously you've read at least the Shema one time in your life. He said, yes. Said you have to know that there's not enough pleasures and riches in this whole world for a whole lifetime to be able to pay for that Shema. Meaning that the value of a mitzvah done in a physical body has such a power that it's more than the world to come. But the pleasure, which means the spiritual pleasure incurred to pay for this mitzvah, there's not enough pleasures in the world, which is limited, to be able to pay for your mitzvah and that connection. What happens is that in order to connect to God, you need to have a physical body. Without a physical body, you can connect to the emanation, to God's light. And that's why the neshama, the soul, when it's up there in its source of all souls, over there, it receives the light of God. But if you want to grasp the essence, you need to be in a physical body. Now, let me share with you that when it comes to the soul is very interesting because on one hand, what is a soul? I once heard someone say, there's something that God did not create. What do you mean? God created everything. God created the heavens, the earth, everything. One thing he did not create, and that's the soul. Why? Because the soul is a part of him. He didn't have to create it. So on one hand, we are all here together, and every one of our souls is a part of God. So who says your soul can be higher than my soul? A soul is a soul. It's a part of God. So who cares which part we're talking about? So on one hand, you're right. At the source of all souls are the same. But the way the souls are going to express themselves, what their role and what their mission is in the world is different for each individual. Let me explain. You have the trunk of a tree, and at the level of the trunk, everything that's going to come out of that tree, even the leaves, they're all attached to the trunk. At that level, we're all one. But when the branches come out, you have different types of branches. You have a branch which is very big and contains a multitude, maybe 50 or 100 little branches that they take. Each one of them has different branches which are offshoots of that branch. And then from the trunk, you have a branch which is much smaller and only has 10, 15 branches coming out of it. They all come from the same source, but the expression of the soul, the expression of the branch is going to be different for each one. You have another example I'd like to give. You have 10 yeshiva students. We have a yeshiva in our synagogue. And I've seen many students. I was in yeshiva myself. We had 60 students in Manchester, England, when I studied. Out of them, how many became rabbis? How many became businessmen? How many just were simple people that, yeshiva didn't affect them that much? And others, unfortunately, might not have continued in the path of observancy. Now, they all came out of the same yeshiva. What happened? Each one has a predominant strength. Each soul, when it comes down, but it only is able to reveal and stay revealed to a certain extent. You have sometimes souls which are very, very, very high, which come into families which are not observant and not practically connected. These souls that are very high are able to come down, and once they reconnect to their roots, they transform the world. They do things that are incredible. We've explained in the past that the reason for this is that these souls, in order to come down, when they come down, they are only allowed to come down if they have a challenge. If they're able to overcome the challenge, then they're able to reveal themselves. We have different levels of souls with different missions. There's, in our souls itself, there is the level of what we call Naran. Naran is the soul, the level of the soul, which is the vitality that everybody has, even animals, which is called Nefesh. I would call it the mechanical soul. It's found in the blood, it's found in the liver. Then we have a higher level of the soul, which is called Ruach, the spirit, which is the emotional soul. Then we have another part of the soul, which is called the intellectual soul, which is called Neshama. And then you have a fourth level, which is Chaya, which is the will of the soul. And then we have the fifth level, which is the quintessence of the soul, which is that part of God, which is equal by every single one of us. What happens is that at the moment of conception, at the moment of intimacy, the kavanah, the intention, the bonding, the fusion that exists between spouse, husband and wife, actually affects what type of soul is going to come down to this world. Because the levushim, the garments which have been created by husband and wife, which is the physical body, which is going to host the soul, is drawing down, so to say, a certain level of soul. I'm going to give you an example you will see. At the time, the Lubavitcher Rebbe would ask his Hasidim, his followers, to bring, when they would meet for the first time at least, to bring a picture of their families. So when a woman with a big family from Russia, after the Iron Curtain came down, came to see the Rebbe, or before the Iron Curtain came down, I'm sorry, she brought a picture. The Rebbe looked, scanned, looked at the husband, the wife, the children, and then the Rebbe pointed to a certain child. And he said, "Tell me about this child." And she said the following story. She said that it was a very, very cold winter in Russia, just like every winter in Russia, I guess. And a group of women needed to go to the mikveh. As they were going, they arrived at the mikveh, and the mikveh was frozen. There was a thin layer of ice. This lady was telling the Rebbe, at that moment, all the women said, "We're not going to the mikveh tonight." She wanted to go, but she didn't have the courage to break that ice. So she literally broke the ice, and she said, "You know what? This is the night we have to go. Let's go. I'm going first." She did a self-sacrifice, a mesirut nefesh, of breaking the ice, going in the freezing waters, in order to keep family purity under a regime where she could get killed or exiled because of it. Because of her, all the other women went as well. She said to the Rebbe, from that night, this child is born. We see here that from mesirut nefesh, a certain sacrifice, self-sacrifice, it's possible to bring a soul which is very, very lofty. Now, again, you're going to ask me, what does it mean to have a lofty soul? Aren't all souls lofty? So the answer is that you have a soul which is more, and I'm going to use Kabbalistic terms right now. There are two types of souls. There's a soul which is called a eved, a servant, and there's a soul which is called a ben, a child. What is the difference between both? So the Zohar Kadosh says that a servant knows what's going on in the house of his master. A child knows what's going on even in the most intimate places, and he knows his way in the whole house. What does the Zohar teach us? It's telling us that the servant has a connection to his master and a connection and a knowledge of his master, which is more general, while the child has a very personal, detailed connection to his father. A soul, normal souls, are souls which only get the 3 levels of the soul which are enclosed in the body. The 4th level, which is a very highly spiritual level, is disconnected. It stays in its source. It's not something that's revealed. And therefore, a person has to toil and refine himself and make a lot of effort in order to reveal his soul. That's 99.9% of souls. Then you have the souls of tzaddikim, which are called the children. When they come down, when the soul comes down, it's not only the 3 levels of the soul which are inside the body that shine, but even the 4th level of the soul, which is above the limitations of the body, shine within them. And therefore, they always feel that connection in a revealed way. Now, I'm going to give you an example. You're going to say, so who has this type of soul, which is so lofty? There are 2 types of souls. Imagine the soul of Moshe Rabbeinu, Moses, our teacher. Moses, our teacher, Moshe Rabbeinu, was buried. He was buried. His body was buried. We don't know where he was buried. Eliyahu Hanavi, Elijah the prophet, was not buried. Not only wasn't buried, he went up with his soul and body. He went up in heaven. So let me ask you, who is higher, Moshe Rabbeinu or Eliyahu Hanavi, Elijah the prophet or Moses? So really, when we talk about souls, the soul of Moshe Rabbeinu was much higher. But the soul of Eliyahu Hanavi was not so high. It wasn't as high as the level of Moshe Rabbeinu. What is the difference? Moshe Rabbeinu, Moses, let me go back to my place. Moshe Rabbeinu, Moses, had a soul that was shining. And it was shining with such power that he did not need to refine his body in order to follow the will of God. He just automatically followed the will of God because of such a revelation. If you see the light in front of you, imagine for a second if you would be able to see angels. If you would be able to see the vitality that's in a non-kosher piece of meat versus the vitality that's in a kosher piece of meat. You would see in your actions what you're causing when you speak Lashon Hara, when you speak bad about somebody else, or when you say your blessing. Obviously, when this light is shining in front of you, you don't need to work on your body or work on your drives, your animalistic drives, in order not to do. You see. That was the level of Moshe Rabbeinu. And because that was the level of Moshe Rabbeinu never had to deal with his body. Because he never had to deal with his body, therefore his body needed to be buried. It didn't come to a level of refinement like Elijah the prophet. Eliyahu Hanavi, Elijah the prophet, didn't have a soul like Moshe Rabbeinu. He had a soul of Ban, which is more the soul of a servant. But he worked on himself. And he worked and refined his body, his thought, speech, and action to such a level where the soul and the body, when he died, they just went up together. That's the level of refinement of Moshe Rabbeinu. And I'm sorry, of Eliyahu and Elijah the prophet. Now, let me explain. So let's just review what we just said. And from here, we're going to build up to the next level and the next understanding of what we can do with our souls if we put our heart to it. We said there are different levels of souls. You could have a soul which is very high, which is sometimes in a body which is very lowly and coarse. You could have a soul which is a lower level soul. What's lower? It means that there's the revelation of light, which is in this world, in this reality, is not so great. But the body is a much more refined body. We see it with our children. There are children which are more spiritual, more inclined to things which are lofty, and children which are more coarse and more involved in physical things. And, we see it in ourselves. Now, let me tell you, we have hope. We have big hope.
Hello?
Put our soul in a physical body. The garments, the expression, the channel through which we express ourselves are thought, speech, and action. Now, if you look at it, you might say, who cares? Thought, speech, and action, our physical body is just an envelope. It's nothing. It's useless compared to the soul. The soul is a part of God. What can we do with that? So I will tell you that it is possible through refining our thoughts, speech, and action to elevate our souls to very, very high levels. Let me explain. There was a Chassid. We started the class saying the story of someone which is foolish, but repeats the words of a sage and looks very smart, sounds very smart. We spoke about somebody that is not a good person, but he helps the poor. So he does a good deed. And at that moment, he looks good. So one day, somebody approached the Alter Rebbe, the founder of Chabad Hasidism, and told him, your Hasidim, your followers, they're absolute bluffers. They're fakers. Why? They pray for long. They call themselves Hasidim, pious ones, but they're not really that. That's not their essence. The Alter Rebbe looked at him and said, very interesting, and thank you very much for your comment about my followers. Because the Mishnah teaches us in Pe'ah, chapter 8, Mishnah 9, that a person that fakes that he is limping, eventually he will be limping before he passes. A person that fakes that he is needy will be needy before he passes. So you're telling me that my Hasidim are faking that they're pious and connected to God? For sure, before they pass, they will really be connected to God and really be Hasidim. From here, we learn that the expression fake it till you make it is a Torah concept. And let me explain why. There's a concept in Hasidut that says that the levushim, thought, speech, and action have the power to draw with them the essence of the soul wherever, in whatever we do. Listen carefully to this story. This had a tremendous impact on me this past week. Admor HaZaken, again, the Alter Rebbe, the founder of Chabad Hasidism, once saw somebody that he knows, and he saw how his soul ascended to what levels his soul was able to reach. And when he saw this, he said, I don't understand. This is of the lower souls, the souls of servants, the souls which are more, of course, we spoke about before, the souls that don't have such a revelation in them. I don't understand, the Alter Rebbe said. I went up and I saw where his soul reached. And it reached levels which are much higher than even some great tzaddikim. The Alter Rebbe thought about it and started contemplating on the actions of this person. Obviously, the Alter Rebbe was divinely inspired. He could see things more than what the eye sees, and his soul was of such a lofty level, he could have access to that information. He said, this man, in thought, speech, and action, did certain things that elevated and gave a booster, a real booster shot, right, for his soul to ascend to such a level. He said, number one, he used his mind to think about Torah. Whatever class he would learn, whatever teachings he would review it in his mind. We know the nature of the mind. It says in Hayom Yom that the nature of the mind is that if the thoughts are not going to be busy thinking good things, the mind can go in places which are absolutely horrific. A mind can bring you to fantasies, all types of desires and lust and places, which is crazy. It's completely the opposite of who you are, and bring you to do things that, But he kept his mind busy with Divrei Torah. Whether it was Tehillim that he would review in his mind, or Mishnah, or a teaching, or a class, he would always keep his mind, try to put his mind on track. Obviously, they didn't have YouTube at the time, and Facebook, and all the nonsense that we are experiencing in this generation. And therefore, his mind wasn't busy with nonsense. He had holy stuff in his mind. Besides that, whenever he had an opportunity, he would review by heart Psalms or teachings, and say it over and over and over and over again. So that's thought, speech. In action, listen to what he did. He gave tzedakah with self-sacrifice. He gave tzedakah in secret, and he even helped his enemies and those who go against him, who oppose him. In the merit of these three things, he refined his garments so much, thought, speech, and action, his body, that it projected the soul to come to a level which is of the highest possible levels. And tzedakah is very powerful, because tzedakah, the Alter Rebbe writes in Tanya, chapter 34, you can check it out, is the result of an effort, which means when I work and I make that $1,000 a month, or $1,000 a week, $1,000 a day, or a minute, or a session, wherever you're holding it. And at that moment, in order to make this money, I had to sweat, I had to think, I had sleepless nights, every part of my being, emotionally, intellectually, physically, I've been involved to make this money. And now I do an act which is selfless, less of myself. I take 10%, 15%, 20%, whatever it is, and I give it to somebody else to support them, to help them. At that moment, it's not only that 10, 20% that I elevated the 90% or the 80% that's left. I refined the body. I went against my nature. The Rambam Maimonides in his explanation on the Mishnah says, when he says, when it comes to tzedakah, he says one should give in many times, not only a lump sum in one time, unless it's needed, but in many times he should give. Why? In order to train himself to break his nature, because each time he breaks his nature, he's opening a channel. So basically, what happens, says the Rayatz, is that the garments, thought, speech, and action can bring the soul in very dark places, can bring the essence of the soul in very dark places. And therefore, a person should be very careful where you put your head, where you put your speech. What do you talk about? Are you speaking Lashon Hara about people all the time? What's in your mouth? Are you using foul language? How do you respect? How do you speak to your spouse, to your children, etc.? Do you use positive language, etc.? Because the thought, speech, and action can draw the soul, the essence of the soul, and put it in a very low place. So one might be completely discouraged because, I don't know about you guys, but we've all done some stuff of the like. We are human. Says the Frierdiker Rebbe, it says, but 1 second. Even if you've done that, you have to know thought, speech, and action are garments, are clothes. So you could change your clothes. You can now decide consciously today on Monday, the 25th of October, 2021, or the 19th, more correctly, of Mar Cheshvan, 5782. We could decide together here as a group to change our garments. Why do I want to put my head over there? Why do I want to speak about this? Why do I want to do this? Let me change my garments. Let me keep my mind busy with maybe listening to more classes on Chabad.org, whatever it is. Being more inspired, be more connected, know more about my connection. And today it's so accessible. The same way the negative is accessible, the positive is accessible by thousands of classes. It says the moment you do that, you're able to take the soul and suddenly propel it to a level that it couldn't go by itself. And that's something that is extraordinary, which means on one hand, you might say, oh, my soul and my level of my soul is already predetermined, so why should I make an effort? Why should I make an effort? There's no reason to make an effort. On the other hand, it says, no. Yes, you have a specific mission to be this and this branch in the world, this branch in the tree. Well, 1 second. If you water yourself properly, you water your tree, if you're going to turn to the sun, you're going to put yourself in the right direction to have enough sunlight, you're able to grow and beyond yourself. You're able to bring your soul to a much higher level than yourself. And therefore, no, we are not limited to have our souls only at a certain level. We can make our souls shine. And to this, I want to conclude with something, an idea that is extraordinary in Kabbalah and Chassidut. We know that the angels, they say, Kadosh, 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 Kadosh. They recognize they're at a level where they emanate from God's name and they recognize the greatness of God and they say, God, you're holy, you're so lofty and we're so small and we have a desire, a longing to be close to you. So the verse says in the prophet, Usrafim omdim mima'al lo. The angels, they stand above the name of Hashem. Chassidut and Kabbalah ask the question, what are you talking about? The angels come from the name Aleph, Dalet, Nun, Yud, which is a lower level of name of Hashem, a lower expression. How can they be standing above the throne of Hashem, above that name? Listen carefully to this. There's a concept that says, Efo shemachshavto shel adam sham hu nimtza. Where the thought and the desire of a person is, that's where he is, says the Baal Shem Tov, completely there. Which means that a person, the angels, because they have such a longing and a desire which is sincere, profound, real, to be close to God, therefore they stand next. They're considered as if they stand over there. What we need to examine in our lives, what we need to ask ourselves is, what do we long for? There are people that long for a new car. But if that's their whole longing, then it's just like the story of the Baal Shem Tov. The Baal Shem Tov was sitting around the table on Shabbat, and there was a chassid that was eating the cholent, the meat of the chamin, and he was saying it's for Shabbat, and he was eating it. He was really involved, engrossed in his meat, as if he never met meat before. So the Baal Shem Tov said to his students, close your eyes. And suddenly, that same chassid looked like an ox dressed with a Hasidic garb and a fur hat. He said, what's the story? What happened? He said, he's so involved in the meat, he became himself the meat that he is eating. Where the thought of a person is, that's where you are. So imagine for a second that we decide that we want to be more spiritual, more connected. We want to be more refined. If we put our thought and longing towards that, we refine our garments, even though we are not there. But we do practice to say good things, think good things, and do good things. Eventually, it brings the soul to such a level that instead of having what most people do is they struggle with the bad, they knock themselves down, they put themselves down, I'm bad, oh, and look what I did, I'm so disgusting, I'm so low. Don't do that. Don't waste your time. The Rebbe teaches us, don't waste your time with fighting with the bad. Just put yourself at a higher level and automatically the bad will fall by itself. Where a thought of a person is, that's where he is. So yes, we can elevate our souls to the highest possible levels. We can open our minds to understand the highest concepts. We could speak the most brilliant spiritual words, and we could do the most beautiful things to make this world a better place. So take 2 minutes right now as we conclude this class and write down something that you really always longed for. And maybe you reanalyze for a second your priorities. At least one thing that you should long for that will bring you a little closer to your true essence. Have a great day. Shavua tov u'mevorach.